Hi everyone, my name is Angela Hackfelt, and for my research paper I chose the topic of ecotourism. What is ecotourism? If you're like me, I didn't really know that much about ecotourism until I stumbled upon it in a previous BBD, and that kind of got me interested and I've wanted to find out more about it. There's no real agreement throughout the world about the actual definition of the term ecotourism. The accepted definition is responsible travel to natural areas that protects the integrity of the environment and ecosystem and benefits local communities economically, so conservation efforts can be encouraged. In the United States, ecotourism can be defined as travel to cultural or natural sites. Visitors to these sites are educated on the ecosystem and cultural aspects, conservation is promoted, and the local economy benefits. Ecotourism is a niche of the global tourism market and is increasing in popularity throughout the world. Are there policies in place to govern ecotourism in the United States? The United States does not have any specific policies that are for ecotourism in itself. There are many policies for tourism, which ecotourism is a subcategory of. The U.S. Department of Commerce is responsible for setting policies for tourism. Ecotourism in the United States is usually practiced in areas that are already protected by many laws and regulations, such as national parks, national forests, national wildlife refuges, and national lake shores and coastlines. The different agencies that administer over these areas promote ecotourism there. Are there policies in place to govern ecotourism in the world? Worldwide, ecotourism makes up about 15% of international tourism and has a growth rate of 15% annually. It is the fastest growing sector of the tourism industry, with estimates ranging from $30 billion to $1.2 trillion annually. The International Ecotourism Society is a major supporter of ecotourism throughout the world, and it defines it as responsible travel to natural areas that improve the well-being of local people and conserve the environment. There are many different countries that have developed their own principles to manage and govern and distinguish ecotourism from other types of tourism. These principles can be models for other countries throughout the world to use to develop their own ecotourism industries. One of these countries is Australia. I'm going to talk about Australia for a minute and their principles for assessing ecotourism. They have 8 principles that they use to help distinguish between ecotourism and different types of tourism within their country. The first principle is they focus on personally experiencing nature in ways that lead to greater understanding and appreciation. They try to integrate opportunities to understand nature into each experience. They represent the best practice for environmentally sustainable tourism, positively contribute to the conservation of natural areas, provide constructive ongoing contributions to local communities, be sensitive to, interpret, and involve different cultures, particularly indigenous cultures, consistently meet customer expectations, and their final principle that they use is to market accurately and lead tourists to realistic expectations. One of the places Australia uses these 8 principles of ecotourism is in Phillip Island. They have a great ecotourism destination there. Here they focus on natural areas by offering natural environment exploration, multisensory experiences, and by inspiring visitors to care for the environment around them. They try to educate visitors so they can understand the importance of nature and practice minimal impact methods. There are conservation centers that ensure habitat and habitat restoration to keep the environment sustained. Conservation is contributed to by minimizing the impact of visitors on the natural environment through walking trails and paths. Non-native species of animals and plants are removed from the area, and the money they receive from patrons and programs helps fund the island conservation efforts. They work with locals by offering volunteer programs and employment opportunities. They use universal symbols on all of their signage and offer multilingual presentations during their wildlife programs. They try to ensure customer satisfaction through live demonstrations and explanations. They market their area with accurate descriptions and truthful interpretations, and they market to specific people. The Australians seem to know what they are doing when it comes to ecotourism, and the rest of the world could learn from their principles and practices for this niche of tourism. Does ecotourism actually improve the economy of the local community where it is practiced? And it's found that particularly in the United States, hiking, camping, mountain and rock climbing, mountain biking, and wildlife viewing are popular ecotourism activities, and they benefit the communities economically that are near or in these mountainous areas where these things are practiced. I found a case study about Costa Rica and the economical benefits that ecotourism brings to that area. Ecotourism has become a booming enterprise in Costa Rica, and it is considered one of Latin America's leading ecotourism destinations. The tourism sector employs 12% of the labor force in the country and has overtaken bananas and coffee as the second leading source of foreign income. Ecotourism has been a catalyst for economic, social, and environmental transformations in the rural areas of Costa Rica, and government officials have lauded ecotourism as a process that improves quality of life and empowers local communities with minimal negative impacts to the environment in their area. Okay, so do the locals actually manage ecotourism in their areas? And another case study journal article I found was about an area of Greece that was greatly depopulated and mostly abandoned, and it was revitalized by ecotourism and nature conservation in the 1990s. The village of Dadia was saved thanks to major efforts by conservation organizations, the Greek government, the European Union, some members of the private sector, and the local populations of Dadia to introduce and promote ecotourism in their little spot of the world. And the locals, helped by some of them were trained as game wardens. The women got together and created a cooperative group that prepared and served traditional meals. And then young women were trained as eco guides for school age children that visited the area. Another case study I found concerned Namibia and the partnerships they have. In Namibia, ecotourism has played a central role in the generation of community revenues, employment, and additional benefits. They have a community-based natural resource program that has helped alleviate rural poverty and increase wildlife conservation. Here, private ecotourism enterprises work together with communal conservancies to achieve biodiversity conservation and help alleviate poverty. Flexible partnerships with equitable power sharing between the private enterprise and the community are needed. Sometimes the private enterprises kind of take over, and so the community members need to stand up and let their voices be heard so that the power sharing between them is more equal. Does ecotourism help maintain cultures and traditions of small societies within the tourism area? Ecotourism does benefit a lot of areas through conservation efforts and providing a better appreciation of local cultures and traditions. Environment, local people, and tourists need to be interlinked components for responsible ecotourism in policymaking and planning. Interactions with local people should be respectful and less objectifying. It is suggested that anthropologists are in a position to engage with the interests of the local people and policymakers to promote responsible tourism in these types of areas. Any community with outstanding cultural and natural resources could benefit from the idea of responsible ecotourism in their area. If done in a responsible and respectful of the environment manner, ecotourism can benefit local people, support conservation, and provide educational experiences. As with everything, there are critics about ecotourism, and some of them are saying that ecotourists are intrusive and disruptive of local cultures because of their desire to seek out more remote and untouched travel destinations. So it's definitely a fine line on whether the cultures in these areas are being maintained or disrupted. Ecotourism expresses the respect and support for local cultures, but there are many instances where local populations can be dislocated and disadvantaged in the creation of ecotourist destinations. Local people can also be led to stage authenticity and can experience strains and disruptions of their lifestyles by catering to these ecotourists. Is ecotourism detrimental to the environment, or does it help establish preservation guidelines for fragile environments or ecosystems and the animals that inhabit them? Several recent studies show a complicated picture of the impact of ecotourism and the amounts of visitors that go to a fragile ecosystem area. Garbage problems by overvisitation to some areas are mounting. Access to resources are causing unemployment in some areas because there are too many ecotourists visiting. There's concern of damaging and destroying ruins and archaeological sites. And there are concerns about the effects of ecotourism on the stress levels, which coincide with the reproduction of animals and birds in ecologically sensitive areas. A case study I found about California sea lion populations kind of stresses this point of too many people coming in, so the population is decreasing. A case study was done on the effects of ecotourism and human interaction with the population of California sea lions. As human interaction increased, the reproductive rates decreased in the animal. It was found that the decreased reproduction rate was caused by stress on the animal in response to human presence. One of the theories is that the stressful exposure of humans to the sea lions may alter specific hormone concentrations, which in turn affects reproduction rates. As ecotourism is used and advocated more widely in regards to conservation, the effects of this industry on animal populations and fragile ecosystems needs to be further studied. Is the term ecotourism just used to attract environmentally conscious people to any type of activity that combines nature and tourism? The validity of ecotourism as a concept is questioned because of unscrupulous operators and a gullible public. Natural environment protection has been sought by local populations to areas that experience a high influx of travelers. The term responsible tourism is replacing the term ecotourism in some areas to develop a more positive interaction between tourists, the environment, and local people. Critics of ecotourism contend that despite its environmental intentions, this niche of the tourism industry is still driven by capital growth. It is conceptualized as small scale and locally controlled, but in practice it becomes little more than a marketing ploy to boost economies and corporate influence. What are the differences between natural tourism and ecotourism? Ecotourism and natural tourism are two different niches of tourism. Natural tourism focuses more on entertainment and recreational activities of the participants, where ecotourism is all about minimal impact, promoting environmental responsibility, and the destination is the prime attraction, with some areas being limited to the amount of visitors allowed in to reduce the damage to fragile ecosystems. There are more strict rules involved with ecotourism trips versus natural tourism, and ecotourism is considered hands-on conservation and preservation efforts. An example of the difference between the two, natural tourism and ecotourism, can be seen in bird watching. In natural tourism, participants focus on specific birds that interest them personally, and in ecotourism, they focus on preserving the bird's habitat and learning about the mechanisms that may be causing the endangerment of local species. After doing all this research, it seems to me that ecotourism is here to stay. What many people believed to be a fad when it first started, ecotourism has become a major player in the global tourism market. As long as ecosystems are protected, rules are adhered to, the trails and paths that are designed to take people into these areas are stayed on, wildlife is viewed but not tampered with, and people practice minimal impact guidelines, ecotourism will be here to stay for a long time. The benefits it brings to local communities economically, culturally, and environmentally far outweigh the negative aspects that it can also bring.